The premise of Expeditions is this. You bought Scythe and you liked it. Now buy it again. This time, it'll actually be an engine builder without any of that fighting nonsense. Similar to Scythe before it, you will have a number of varied objectives that you can go out and accomplish, and you want to do that as efficiently as possible. You will take expeditions to achieve these various things, and that's about where the theme ends. It's a fun engine building game, but does it hold up in comparison to the greatness of Scythe? I guess we're gonna find out right now. Kind of. I think kind of. I think kind of in a different way. Look, there you go. You don't even need to watch the rest of the review. But if you want to know how it plays, well, let's set it up. Here it is in all of its oversized box glory. Ah, perfect. An insert that definitely works. Love that. And you know why it doesn't work? Because I refuse to take off these rings for these little mechs because I think taking them on and off is stupid and I shouldn't have to, but apparently I do have to. We'll talk about that in the production element. For now, let's just set up the game, or as much as we can on this table. This is the base camp. Set the tiles up like this. You have your starting tiles that start face up, and then your other tiles which will end up face down. But for our sakes, we might flip some of them face up. Oh, stupid inserts make me mad. There's the top, and there's the bottom. And we never saw the top portion again, so that you can actually see some things that are going on the game board. You also throw one of these map tiles on each of the things that you get to collect if you're the first person to go there and kind of flip it over. There's going to be these face-up cards in the middle of every section. You'll be able to grab them and interact with them in certain ways. You will also choose a player color, which I have chosen as blue because that's what came out of the bag first. Get a player mat of your choice of the particular mech that you want to be. Grab your mech, which will start on the base camp and then never return hither there once more, which will roam around these locations doing a bunch of stuff, letting you raise your stats so that you can spend them on things. The core part of the game choices will be this section right here on your player board. You will start with your cube here and you will choose to cover one of these things. You'll either cover the move section, the play, or the gather section. And then you will get to take the two actions that correspond with the things that you didn't cover. So in here, you can move and play a card. Or if I was like this, I could move and gather, which let's say we did that, I could move up to 3 spaces, and then wherever I land, I get to take the thing that's on there. These can be getting workers, these can be getting additional cards, etc. Everybody also starts with some 2 characters, 2 cards in their hand. The game is sort of structured in that you will have your player board here and you will have your sort of tableau of playable cards on one side. That's referred to as your hand, as though you're holding them, but so that everybody can see them. And then when you've used them, you will play them to the right of your board, and that's indicated that you've played them. Each card will generally also have a worker spot, which when you play it, you can do the action if you have that specific worker. You would take that worker from your player mat and you'd plop it on the board and you'd get to do the thing. For example, gain 1 face-up meteorite. You just get a card if it's of a specific type. Each card also will have sort of a basic resource that you will get by playing it, but the majority of the powers that chain together come from this aspect. Like Scythe, there will be these different objectives that you can complete, and once you complete 4 of them, the game is over, you add up all your points, you see who wins. But it's not always the person who triggers the end of the game that will win the game. The last game that I played, I had only played 3 stars down, but because I had invested heavily into quests, these hearts, which improved the status of all of my stars were worth 30 points, and Zach's stars were only worth 20 points, because he got all 4, but he didn't invest in quests, he did other things and other different combinations. What are these things you can do, you ask? Well, let's review. These first 3 have to deal with gathering specific cards, quests, which are hearts, meteorites, which are these little houses, and upgrades. Those are the meteorites, which look like this, and upgrades, which look like this. All of these do different permanent benefits, but once you have gotten 4 of them, and you've gotten 4 of them onto your player mat, around your player mat, you've sort of completed them in different ways, you'll slot them in up top, you can then achieve that objective. We're going to skip these 2 for a second and move on to here. You just have 8 cards. That's easy. Get 8 cards. You get cards by going to places on the board. And here you have 7 workers, or you have 5 map tiles. Workers gained by going to spaces on the board, and map tiles gained by exploring a place before anybody else does. You're going to get a map tile. You'll flip this over. You'll get that map tile down onto your supply. Now, whenever you explore a new area, you draw from the bag corruption. This is showing that this place is corrupted. You'll draw a certain number and stack them up top here. And then later on, cards will interact, which will allow you to, if you're on that spot, vanquish that corruption. So let's say I had 6 guile, this resource. I could vanquish the corruption. I could spend 3 guile and take one of these off. And then I could spend my other 3 guile and take one of these off. This has now opened up a specific space. We can see this space here is the upgrade space, which allows you to then start playing upgrades. You'll also see the color of these correspond with these 2 symbols, and that's what these objectives are based around. If you've collected 7 corruption, not 7 value, but 7 physical tokens, you can put your star there. And then there's 1 space on the board, a special spot, the number 20, which requires you to spend 20 corruption to complete, but only you are then able to get that spot, this star especially. Also, when you clear it, it allows you an action to actually place down the stars. And that's where this differs a little bit from Scythe. In that Scythe, it was an immediate end. Once somebody hit all their objectives, the game is over. Here, you can see you have a little bit of wiggle room. You can see, okay, they're going to finish their 4th objective, then they still have to get back to the star to claim it. So I still have like 2 or 3 turns left to plan and left to optimize, which I think is a really nice improvement. That's the overview of the game, though. Every time you're going to be choosing one of these things. You have to move your cube. So if you moved and gathered before, your next one is going to be either moving and playing, or playing and gathering. Either hammering at that spot where you're at, or going to new places to get new resources to help play and activate cards. You can also refresh your cube and your cards. So any cards that you've played, you then basically get to take back into your hand, but you skip your turn. The next time going over here, you get to take all 3 of these actions, and then once again, moving, following the arrows and choosing between the 2 until you decide to refresh or reset. There are some cards or some spaces on the board which will allow you sort of a free refresh, then you don't have to waste your turn doing that refresh action. That's the convoluted, high-level overview of how to play this game, which doesn't really scratch the surface of what this game is putting forward. This game is taking the engine-building nature of Scythe to the next level, and it's doing that with this big old stack of cards. There's going to be 5 cards that are up in the center, but you have this whole stack at which you can just pull from. You can sweep those cards, you can refresh the card market. Some spots on the board will allow you to take any face-up card. Some spots will allow you to sweep the whole market and give yourself new things that you can access. And some spots will only allow you to take cards that are adjacent to it as well, making the layout of how these cards come out, of how these tiles come out, because you shuffle these, it's a different board, a modular map every game, be even more important to the implications of this efficiency puzzle. But just like Scythe, it is an efficiency puzzle. You are trying to get to the end of the game before somebody else can. You are trying to get the most points through whatever combination of these cards works best for you. And often they chain together. If you've made 1 meteorite, then the next time you get a 2nd meteorite, you get to activate the 1st one. And so these things build and cascade upon each other as you go throughout the game. But you'll see that the stack of cards is pretty hefty, and that's even before I add the second half, which makes it even heftier. There are a lot of cards in this game, and that means that there are a lot of different abilities that you don't know if they are going to come out, but they'll probably come out in some capacity. You are a bit beholden to the card market in a sense, because these define a third of your actions, and honestly, the more powerful abilities come from your card. It would be basically unheard of to complete the game without investing in cards, mainly because 1, 2, 3, 4 of the 7 objectives have to deal with the cards. You have to do something with cards, even if it is just collect 8 of them, and for some reason you've gotten enough corruption to not have to worry about these things. Although I would never feel like I could see a game end in this capacity because the cards are so integral. This was the breakdown of the last game that I played where Zach finished it up very quickly. But because of this, Expeditions is that sort of game where you really have to adapt to what is presented in front of you. It's not something where you can pursue a set strategy because you don't know what cards are going to come up and because you have no guarantee that the cards that you will want to come up will come up. But you need cards to be successful in. And figuring out how these things chain together is the exciting part of this puzzle. I really like the modular board of Expeditions. I like that it feels different the further out you get on the map. Here, these same 6 will always be randomized in a similar way, but a game where you have access to the workers in the same spot does feel legitimately different than if the blue workers are on one side and the red workers are on the other. Deciding how you progress through the map, deciding which way you go and which spaces you can get to from these sort of linchpins feels fun and gets more impactful the further you journey out. Not in like an overwhelmingly like game-breaking way, because basically every tile you flip up will have one of these 3 symbols on it, one of the 3 sort of end game goals that you're pursuing. Completing a meld, completing an upgrade, or even just being allowed to drop a star down. The reason why there aren't any hearts is because the quests specifically have a spot on them, a number on them, number 14, where you have to go out, find number 14, which I think is over here then. It's up there. It's up in the nether regions. It's up in the off the wintry tundra that we don't talk about. Find number 14 and then complete an action or a card action, which allows you to solve the quest to get additional bonuses. And the card play of seeing how all these things come together is very satisfying, albeit really dependent upon what cards come out in the market. Sometimes the market will just chain together well for you, and sometimes they won't. But it's sort of surveying what cards are out there, surveying what you currently have in your hand, and trying to make those decisions and adapt on the fly. The character variability is also nice. Like, we have a nice starting variability. Everybody will always start with 2 cards, a person and a companion. So you have a little bit of a basis at which to go off of. And one fun thing about your starting people is that they give you an initial resource, but then when you get your first objective and when you get your second objective, they can really help ramp up the game. So getting one of these, which provide sort of a variable setup, and then getting a specific mech, which all have different abilities of varying levels of efficacy. This one, gaining cards directly to your hand, so you don't have to refresh to use them. This one, it's easier to vanquish. You have to gain less resources before you start collecting these corruption tokens. This one, where you can solve, upgrade, and meld up to 5 times. You're normally limited to 4 around your board, but here you can get an additional one, which can trigger and that cascading effect one more time if you are pursuing it. I think this is kind of the weakest one in my opinion. This, where your move range is 1 to 4, so you have an extra push of movement. You have a little bit more flexibility on the board doing the gather action. And then here, where you're incentivized to go out and do those expeditions, where you can trash a map token at any time to gain either resource or a point. So if you're just running around in a 2-player game and you're unlocking every single spot on the board, that could be 14 points right there, if you don't need to use it to complete other things. And there are other ways of gaining various tokens as well. So there is a nice variability here, and there is a lot here that can make this game quite replayable. Replayability is always sort of a concern for me for games, and especially in modern board gaming, where I feel a lot of us have a lot of different board games. So while that replayability is quite good, it also leads for varying effects and varying playthroughs when those combinations just kind of don't come up, or somebody grabs some early and then you have a bit of a runaway leader where people can't really catch up. I think this is a minor quibble, but it is worth bringing up because there is a way for this game to snowball and leave other people at the table feeling like, oh, okay, well, what's the point? This person already has these 4 upgrades. They're chaining this every time they move. I just can't get my footing. I think this game is going to get compared to Scythe, obviously, quite a bit, because it is billing itself as a sequel to Scythe. It uses the same style, it uses very similar feel, but it does have the differences. I find the engine building aspect in this is a lot more exciting because of that variability, because of that card play, and because of this impactful stack of cards. I find this to be a much less fixed game than Scythe is. I feel Scythe, the opening moves are sort of by rote if you know the game, because you are locked into a specific spot on the board and you have to, okay, I need to generate this resource so that I can even expand into the rest of the board. And here you don't have that. Here you have the opportunity to just start blazing a trail, or here you can go get some workers, or here you can go get some cards. Generally, the opening moves feel like they might be a bit set here as well, because your specific characters will have workers that they need in order to activate their abilities, and you'll probably want to go either here if there's nothing good that's up, or here if there are good things that are. Right here you get to draw from the top of the deck, here you get to take face-up cards. And so having that battle of, okay, I'm going to take the face-up cards, okay, I'm going to go and take the workers, great, well then I'll just run over and get the other worker, okay, now I'll go and get some cards. Like there's going to be that back and forth until somebody decides to blaze forward, blaze a trail, and make the push into the expeditions to get the better abilities. I find that the focus on card play, while it is then exciting, also makes for a much sort of less epic experience. And I think Expeditions is sort of putting itself forward, trying to be this epic game in a few ways. Number one, the size of the damn box is about the same size as Scythe. Let's see. Oh, you know what? In fact, it's bigger. Scythe is a little thicker, Expeditions is a little bit longer, and this has absolutely no right to be this big. It is sort of putting itself forward as if it is going to be this epic, large people on a map experience, and Scythe, I find the board is very compact. Like this box is actually pretty full of stuff. I put the extra 2 factions in my copy of Scythe, but other than that, like this box is pretty much filled to the brim. The box in Expeditions does not need to be this large whatsoever. This is a card game masquerading as an epic experience. These tiles, the only reason I can see them being this big, this obnoxiously big that they can't even fit on the frame of my table, is because we want to house the standard card shape in the middle. And because you want to have this big mech and you want to be able to house it on the spot. But it really does not need to be like this whatsoever. This game feels fairly overproduced as it is, especially with the size of things. And I generally like Stonemaier Productions, but I feel like this is a game which is trying to trick you as to what it actually is and what the feeling actually is. You could scale this all down by 20% and be completely fine. If you wanted to have large cards and you wanted to have a smaller board area, like these could be standard Catan size hexes, no problem, because the amount of information that you need to see on this board is this right here. It's this symbol. That's it. Like that's all you need to see, and the number. And so to have this big giant board, which then makes you feel like, okay, maybe they're trying to have this big giant box for some reason. Maybe they're keeping room for expansions, but when you have this huge box, which doesn't even work effectively for things that you want, because I don't know, I'm the type of person who wants to put a disc on once and not take it off every time, but if you don't take this disc off, then this mini doesn't fit in properly into its space. That's finally fitting in properly, whereas this buddy, as I sort of jammed it in there, you don't get down into the recesses of the board of the thing, which also means that you can't put the lid back on top, which also is the reason why everything's spewed out all over the place. There's no reason for this board to be this big, or this box to be this big, as you just need a spot to house those cards, some even hexes, and then over here, I don't know, maybe it's for sleeve cards, but your cards don't even fit in there. So I'm not even sure what is supposed to be housed in here, but it looks like they're trying to keep room for an extra expansion, for expansion content down the line. That's the only reason why I could see it being this big, and even still, it's just so completely inefficient. So much so that we're gonna get rid of this right now, so that I can actually store the game in the way I would like. There. Oh, and it's good I pulled it out, so I could actually get all the tokens that fell out of its stupid insert. Much better. Oh, and you know what? Just to make my point, there you go. That's basically 90% of the game now housed in 50% of the box. Throw some elastics on there, you're fine. Add some little token, the Stonemaier token holders to go boom boom that actually close. Perfect. There. Much better. Now maybe it'll actually work, but likely not, because there's still going to be lid lift here, which means that this will extend and means that your lidless token container that they've provided you with is likely going to continue to spill all over the place. So it's a work in progress, but this I like significantly more. Honestly, going to probably end up tossing the whole thing anyway, because it's a horrible piece of junk. But the game isn't. Production issues aside, insert issues aside, the game is actually quite enjoyable. But I think you need to know the type of game that it is before going into it. I like that it is a sequel to Scythe, but I think it is a sequel to Scythe in the way that San Juan is a sequel to Puerto Rico, or that Race for the Galaxy is a prequel to Roll for the Galaxy. It is a pared down version that I think is mechanically more streamlined, but is still lying to you about the sort of epic experience that it may present to you. I'm struggling with how to score this one. I think it is fun. I think it is staying in my collection, but I'm also hesitant in terms of effusing praise upon it because the reliance on the cards ultimately feels very random. And not that randomness is a bad thing in games. I think random games can be quite fun. And I think part of the fun of this is seeing the puzzle pieces in front of you, trying to get there as quickly as possible, and then hoping you stumble upon the right locations, right? Any time where you reveal a location and you're hoping to hit a certain spot, there's a huge element of randomness there, and there's a little bit of that excitement and that push your luck quality, which for me lowers like the strategy level. And so what I really appreciate about Scythe is that it is so streamlined in a strategic sense, in an efficiency sense, you have 14 moves to 17 moves to finish the game. And so I really like that aspect of it, and I find that I am potentially missing that from this because of the variability, which I think is actually a really good thing. So it'll depend upon if you didn't like Scythe, but you were hoping for a more streamlined engine builder, I think this is absolutely one to check out. If you do like Scythe and you want a true sequel to it, I don't know if this gives that epic experience and that epic nature that it is potentially trying to do. I think the amount of stuff that you can do in a turn that you're either moving, you have three choices essentially, move, play, or gather. I find that streamlined nature to be more effective at like getting that streamlined process, but I also find there is then a heavier reliance upon card abilities, on text abilities on cards and how the cards interact. And I find that this is as cumbersome to teach, or maybe even more so than Scythe. And so it's a weird thing. I think I like this game personally more than I like Scythe, but I think I would rate it lower than Scythe as a game. And so it's a weird sort of juxtaposition that I'm juggling with, because like I think I personally prefer it because I like that randomness and I like that flow, but I also think that Scythe is like objectively still the better game. If that makes sense. Or I don't think this will overthrow it on the charts. Even if I like it more, I also would rate Scythe higher. So I think I'm going to give this like a 3.5. For me, it's a 3.5. It's a solid game. I'm very happy to play it again. It's staying in my collection, but I can't quite give it that sort of room and board seal of approval because of what I perceive to be the chance to have like vastly different plays of this game. I think it will be less consistent of a game than Scythe. And so, yeah, I don't know. It's one that I still want to keep playing. It's one that I'm not getting rid of anytime soon. And the main reason that I will be getting rid of it when I do down the line is because the box is so stupidly large and the game is stupidly large and it doesn't need to be that. Like, that's my biggest gripe. That's my biggest annoyance, if you couldn't tell throughout this review. It just doesn't need to be the scale that it is, and I think it feels like I'm being tricked. Feels like I'm being tricked into having a more epic experience than the game actually provides. And to be fair, that happens in a lot of games. That happens in a lot of overproduced games. That happens in a lot of Kickstarters, a bunch of dice checkers or dungeon crawlers. But I just feel like I'm being tricked, and I want to see the smaller, streamlined version of this. I don't know. 3.5 feels too low for it, but I also can't go any higher on my own personal scale right now. So that's it. That's the end of the review. I hope my muddying through this gave you some semblance of what to expect from this game. Huge thanks to Stonemeyer. They supplied me with this copy as a review copy, and they never watch the reviews, so they say, you can say whatever you want. I say, great, because I would say whatever I want anyway. I want you to get the best games possible, and I think there's a lot about Expeditions to like, and that certain people will really enjoy. And for the other vast majority, I think they'll go, yeah, it's good. And that's kind of where I'm sitting at. Yeah, it's good. Didn't blow me away, but absolutely wouldn't turn down playing it anytime. So thanks for being here. If it's your first time at this channel, welcome. I'll see you in the next one. If it's your last time at this channel, well, give me a thumbs down on your way out. My name is Chris George. I don't have a catchphrase, but I do have an unwavering loyalty to space and efficiency, and this does none of those things. And vertical storage, really. And this really misses the boat on all of them. I assume when an inevitable expansion comes down the line, that's why the box is so big. I assume, and you can see that the amount of space that's left for tiles is pretty significant. I think it would be fun to see some different tiles that you could shuffle in, but then that would affect the quest. It wouldn't be that bad. You would just, anytime a quest number came up that wasn't on the board, you just draw a new one. That's a very easy fix and easy way to incorporate that into the game. Oh yeah, there we go. That's the sequel, Attack of the Clones, a Scythe sequel. The sand is coarse and the sand is rough, but you'll get a good time if you play it. I'll see you later.